Good morning. My name is Meg Detloff, and I work for USGS PNAMP. Thanks for joining us for the Fish Monitoring Work Group Data Display Implementation Task Kickoff Meeting. A couple of housekeeping tips before we get started. Please mute yourself by clicking the little microphone on your Teams platform. Also, please turn your camera off if you're not speaking. It helps everybody stay focused. If you don't see the toolbar, try wiggling your mouse a little bit, and it'll either pop up on the top or the bottom of your screen, just kind of depending on how you're using the app. You should see a bar similar to mine. If you're just on your phone, please use *6 to mute yourself. We are recording this meeting, just so you guys know. If you have questions or feedback, please use the chat function and type your question in there, or you can also raise your hand and unmute yourself. And like I said earlier, we can mute you, but we can't unmute you. So that's on you, and that's obviously this little microphone button. And again, we're recording the meeting, and it'll be available on our YouTube channel next week. So in case anybody in your agency wants to watch the meeting, they can do it whenever they need to. And I'll send that link out when I send the follow-up email out. So now our task leads will turn their cameras on and introduce themselves. I think you guys' cameras are already on. Can't see you right now. So feel free to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I guess we'll go in the order that's shown. I'm Nancy Leonard. I'm with Pacific State Marine Fishery Commission, and I'm one of the program managers over there, overseeing some of the data system, including StreamNet.
Yes,
Thanks.
and oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Laura. Sorry.
I'm Laura Erickson. I'm also with Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission and program manager as well. I work with Nancy, and I oversee more of the field work that we do, but also work with Nancy on the databases.
Perfect. And now it's the participants' turn. You guys don't have to worry about turning your cameras on or turning your mics on. Simply open up the chat and introduce yourself with name and organization in there. That helps us keep track of participation and aids you in kind of becoming familiar with the chat function. And while you guys are doing that, I'm going to cover the agenda. Today, I'll introduce the Fish Monitoring Workgroup Charter and proposed engagement process, and then Nancy will review the data display task that we did last year and its 2021 recommendations and status. Next, Lara will cover the task description and break down Task 1's display of data availability status and homework before handing it back to Nancy, who will describe Task 2's display of data for groups of populations and examples. Then we'll wrap it up with next steps. And with that, let me give you guys a quick overview of the charter. I'm going to drop the charter link in here so you guys can access it. Sorry, it takes me a little bit of time to flip around in here. All right, cool. All right. So as you can see on the screen, there's just kind of little snips from the actual charter. This document gives an overview of the roles and responsibilities of this project. Your responsibilities as a general member and task team member are simple. Aid in identifying topics of interest, serve as a subject matter expert for a task, or provide input on products. We hold 3 full fish monitoring work group meetings per year in typically a quarterly structure format, skipping summer due to a lot of field seasons. The meetings feature a technical talk that we feel is of interest to our partners and in the region, as well as current task updates. We also send out periodic emails with announcements and other information. You are more than welcome to send us papers or let us know if you think there's an event or information that we could discuss within the group. We're here to help you guys communicate and engage with each other. This also leads me to the engagement process. Originally, we were using Microsoft Teams, but due to issues with some organizations' firewalls, we're now using it as more of a temporary working space. You can still get all the information and access everything and actually work in the documents if you'd prefer to do that. It kind of helps us collate stuff easier, but if it's a struggle for you to get into Teams, we can obviously accommodate you in any way that you need. Information about the project can be found on pnamp.org, and each task now has its own project page. So this is the project page on pnamp.org, and then each task has its own page, which this is what the data implementation one looks like. The task pages have, their purpose statements, links to draft or finalized products, and links to the events. So in case you missed something, you can go back to the event and access materials or links to the YouTube page. Accessing PNAMP.org is easy, open to everyone, and doesn't require jumping through a lot of hoops to get information, kind of the way that Teams was causing a bit of a struggle for us. We still welcome folks to join the Teams platform if you're interested in working directly in the shared documents. Let's see. And so you just want to visit the home page, and then it'll have all the links on how to join. It'll look like something similar to this here. If you're part of the Department of Interior, it's super easy to get in. You just link and it just adds you. And if you're outside, it takes a little bit of work, and there's an instructions manual that you kind of have to go through. Let's see here. If you simply want to keep informed about upcoming events or tasks, feel free to contact me and I will add you to the main list and any of your preferred task lists. We do, like I mentioned, typically record the meetings and presentations. So if you're unable to attend, visit our meetings event page to access the links or go to our YouTube channel. And in a second, when Nancy takes over, I'll drop the project page link in the comments, and I'll also drop the link to our channel on YouTube. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Nancy.
Okay, well, thank you all again for joining us. I see some familiar names, I won't say faces, some familiar names from when we did the task group number 1. I think it's only a year ago, right? 2021. It seems like a while. Back then it was Iverson, Greg Wilkie, and myself that had convened a group to start getting input from anyone interested, involved in StreamNet and Mayfac and others to help guide how we could improve the display of information on the Coordinate Assessment Partnership high-level indicator query that we have. So I wanted to just touch base quickly on what had happened back then, what recommendations we got back then, and what has happened since then and where we're at today. Next slide. So this is not as pretty. I'm the one that did this, not Meg, otherwise it would look a lot nicer. But this is a quick snapshot of what we've done so far. So back in early 2021, when we convened the Fish Monitoring Work Group Data Display Task Group, we basically went through how we were currently showing information on the Coordinate Assessment Partnership Fish High Level Indicator query, the map-based one, to try and get a better sense of how we can make it easier for people to locate the information they needed, as well as how we could improve how we were conveying that content so it was clear what was on the map and why certain things may not be shown on the query. So based on all the recommendation that we received from the 2021 Data Display Task Group, the StreamNet staff, in particular Greg Wilkie, helped us sketch up some alternatives on how we could address the recommendation from that last task group's input. We went back and forth with the task group, and when we had a pretty good sense of what we could do, keep in mind what was feasible for us to do. We weren't going to try and create something very difficult for us to maintain, but what would be that sweet spot where we could address the concerns, the recommendation from the task group, while at the same time being something that we could manage at StreamNet. We brought those recommendation and the mock-ups to the StreamNet Steering Committee, as well as the StreamNet Executive Committee in 2021, and sought their approval and their input. And pretty much the StreamNet Executive Committee appreciated the input from the task group and supported for the StreamNet staff to go forward and implement those. So we did go forward, implemented the content, the recommendation that we received. It actually resulted in us developing a secondary query, a tabular query, to be a companion to the map query so that we could provide some additional functionalities more easily for the data consumer. So some of the ones that we took care of was through the tabular query, we were able to add additional filters to make it easier for data consumers to locate what they were looking for in terms of just sorting really quickly and finding all population that had a given high level indicator estimate category, like natural origin, spawner, or SARS. as well as some other filters that the task group had recommended as being value added. We also cleaned up a bit the content that we had on both the map query and the tabular query by removing non-TRT from the end of some of the population names, since that wasn't deemed necessary anymore and just tended to confuse folks when they were reading the population names. We also started addressing how we would display partial population estimate. So in the original map query, we basically would have folks select the population they wanted to see, and then when they would click on that population and expose the data on the map query, they then would also be able to see potentially estimates that were derived for a portion of that population, which is what we call partial or subpopulation, or for the whole population. And the way those were displayed may not have been as clearly as we could have done. So we've been working on improving how that's displayed on the map query, and we're pending implementation of that one until we have the 2 tasks that we need further input on, which is the focus of this data display task group. But we did improve the display and access of partial population estimates versus whole population estimates on that new tabular query. So the 2 remaining task group recommendations that were provided to us last year, which we now are coming back to this broader group to get further input, are the last 2 rows. The first one has to do with how we can provide that broader context of the availability of data for those populations for which we do not have a high-level indicator in our CAP data system, so that folks aren't misled in thinking there are no data out there, but that there are, but they're just not something that's appropriate for the CAP fish HLIs at this time. The other task that we need input on, which will be the second task we discussed today, is how we go about displaying high-level indicators for groups of population. So currently in our system, we are already receiving high-level indicator estimates for superpopulations, which is what we refer to for groups of population that are monitored as a group. And then we also have in our system the MAFAC, Columbia Basin Task Force Partnership stock group that were created by that process. But those are a different animal in that we don't have high-level indicator estimates generated by the monitoring that's being done in the field for that group. So those are a little bit more difficult for us to figure out how to display on our system. So basically the focus of today will be that first task, helping us improve and confirm how we can provide additional information on data available for those populations that don't have high-level indicators in our system, and then diving a bit deeper onto how we can display content for super pops that are monitored as a group and those more novel groupings developed by the MAFAC process. Next slide. So just like I basically hinted at, our main purpose today is that we need your input so that we can further implement the guidance and the recommendation we received from last year's task group on this topic, and that were approved for implementation by the StreamNet Executive Committee. So we will be focusing on those 2 areas. Laura is going to be the one presenting how we're proposing on displaying the content for the status of availability of data for populations not in our system. And then I'll be focusing the discussion on how we can improve display of information for those 2 different groupings of population that we have. Our intent from this task group, which right now we'll see if we need another meeting or not, but we basically need your help in correcting our good faith approach, best good faith attempt at capturing available data for populations for which we don't have high-level indicator, and also taking a look at people, the static content that we may want to display along with the available content that we may want to display on for the groups of population. And I think I may have stolen Laura's slide. I was on a roll.
You had it. That's awesome.
So next slide, Mike, Greg. Okay, go ahead, Laura.
Okay. So I'm going to go into some of the details of the first task of task 1, which Nancy touched on, is the display of data availability status for Idaho, Oregon, and Washington natural origin salmon and steelhead populations. So again, this was through a recommendation, 2021 recommendation for the fish monitoring working group. Data display task group supported by the StreamNet Executive Committee. So looking at populations without catfish HLI's data. So as you see on the display here, we're meeting to discuss how to add content about status of data availability for a particular population. So for example, it could be extirpated, no data available. Other option is that monitoring exists, but the data are not currently available on the StreamNet site or on this site, and provide the user information about where they may access these data. And then that will follow up with some suggestions on where to obtain and how to display this new information, which we are looking to you to help inform us on that direction forward. So next slide, Megan. So yeah, so the proposed standard content, which is the data availability. So it's just displaying this as you see in the box on the right. So indicating that the data are available from another source. So whether that's Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife in this example or another entity, that no data are available because it is not monitored, the population isn't monitored. No data available because there are no fish present for various reasons. And then 4 and 5, which I'm kind of grouped here because both of them deal with no recent data available because monitoring has stopped. So the first case would be some past data are available from another source. And then the other case, or the second case, would be that some past data are available from StreamNet's fish monitoring data or from another source. So there's either option there. And okay, next slide. So here we have the display of data availability content. This is actually dealing with the data source, and this is the proposed standard content that we have here. So if it's known, then we would provide the full, if agreeable, provide the full tribe, state agency, federal agency, or other organization's name. So for example, Confederate Tribes and Bands of Yakima Nation. Whether it comes from the Fish Passage Center or whether it comes from Idaho Department of Fish and Game. So that would be displayed on the middle details that you see on the right in the box that pops out. And then if there's no data that are available, then we would simply indicate none in that for that field. Next slide, please. And so looking at the data contact, the proposed standard content that we have for review today or through this gathering is to view this agency's StreamNet affiliated data management staff who can assist in locating these data. So we'd simply place a link there and have it orient the user to be able to determine who to follow up with on locating those data. The other option is to view the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission staff participating in StreamNet who can assist in locating these data. We could also provide here the name, affiliation, and email for the Fish Passage Center, as you see here. Another option is to have the organization's website URL or the site where the user could go to portal in or to access these data. And then again, for no data would simply indicate none. So this is the spreadsheet that we will send to you after we wrap up this meeting. And it's the display of data availability content that you see here, which I'll go into more detail with the following slides. But to just give you an idea on the metrics and keeping in mind that this is very much a draft Excel spreadsheet, and our intent is that you would review this draft spreadsheet and then send it back to us with your input. So there are a total of 583 rows to review, various populations. The rows are filtered to hide populations with catfish HLI's data, just to kind of streamline it a little bit. There's 454 extant, 102 extirpated or functionally extirpated populations, 27 that are introduced or reintroduced. And then just of note for non-ESA listed populations, be sure to add a comment for potential contact person or source for the population GIS layers for us to follow up on. And then we'll go right into the spreadsheet. That's fine, Meg. The next one works. So I can't firmly commit to the name of the spreadsheet being.
You want to stop for questions now, or wait for them to wait for you to be done before they ask questions?
Oh, there is a hand. We could.
Yeah, Russ has his hand up right now. Yeah, we can probably just pause. Russ, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question on the last page. I know there's an ongoing another initiative, and it was just my only comment was about the non-listed populations that you have, because there's an effort to continue to document and create the populations and species range maps. Will there be an updated process that, you know, as those populations are further defined, this can continue to be maintained, or is this a one-shot effort?
Yes, the former, not the latter. Oh, or
yeah,
Nancy,
we'll be coordinating with Van's team. So one thing Van always highlights to me is if there is a GIS layer out there that someone who has management authority has available, then we'd like them to share that with us. And then Van will be the one following our Pacific State guidance to create the appropriate polygons layers to display on the map.
Yeah, and please definitely indicate that on the spreadsheet if you have that insight when you complete the homework.
Excellent. Good question, Russ. Thanks. All right, Laura.
So, was there one before this?
Yeah, just that one.
Oh, no. Okay, never mind. So yeah, again, I can't confirm that I'll have this name. I'm sure it'll be slightly different, but the start of it should be similar. So this is just if you go, once you receive the spreadsheet, if you go to the initial tab, which is the instructions for the task group that convened today, these details will be available to you under there, and it outlines exactly what we're asking of you. And then of each of the tasks. So the first task will involve the next sheet that you see on the workbook. And then the second task will be the third one. But I'll just go into more detail on the first task if you could advance to the next, Meg. So for task one, just noting, please be sure to access the second tab, looking at data that's available on the spreadsheet. So sorry, Meg, next one, please. And so here you see the actual spreadsheet that's available at that tab. So we're asking you to review, obviously you'll look at the population that it applies to, and then consider the status of the population or the stock to make sure that that's accurately captured there. And that would be in column E, and then in column F would be the data availability status. So what sort of data are available for that population, whether it's no data or there's some monitoring or monitoring has stopped, and ideally add as many details as possible. We'll talk about standardization in the next task, but yeah, if you could give us the input. And then column G is about the data source. So identifying what the best data source is for those data. Column H, which is in the pink here, would be the data contact person. So the individual or the agency that would be the best to contact to source that data. And then column I we've provided, and in that column, it just allows you to add comments, including contact person for the non-ESA population GIS layers, which is kind of what we touched on with Russ's question. So next slide, please. So just going, that again, that's column I. So just going into some of the details on how we're looking for your feedback on this draft, rough draft of this, of building out the information for the different populations on the spreadsheet. If the content is incorrect, please change the color of the cell of which that incorrect content lies within, and replace this cell content with the correct information. And then if there are additional details in the comment box that are tied to that cell or as a comment, just be sure to include that under column I. So, and if you are changing multiple fields within a row, then I would say just make sure to indicate, okay, green, or either the column or the colors, and that these are the additional comments for that, for those fields. Next slide, please. And then, yeah, if we can take some questions now just on task 1.
And just before we launch into that, the way we created this first draft, first attempt, is we had Ray Beamsterfer, I think that you guys are familiar with him, assist us and try and do a quick crawl of the internet in his mind to know, you know, what are the stats of this population, what if there are data available or not. We didn't limit him to a specific type of data category because we figured that would be something that's so much in flux that trying to be a little bit too specific on our query tool by saying, oh, this, you know, this one has juvenile data but no adult, or this one has adult and juvenile. You know, we realized that was going to start becoming too difficult to maintain going forward. But as you are reviewing this, basically, if there are any data available for that population, that's what we want to know. You don't need to start splitting hairs, because we figure what would happen is if there are data available and we can communicate to folks the source to access whatever data is available and who to contact, then they might be able to figure out what's available at that point in time when they make that connection, since we figure that might change over time. Jake, you have a question?
Just for the spreadsheet, it's laid out really well. I appreciate you guys making it very clear for us. Is there any possibility, though, you could add another field for what state the population lies in, so that we don't have to scroll through every other state's information that we don't know about, so we could filter further on the rows in that spreadsheet?
I'm trying to figure out there's something hidden that we might be able to leverage already. Yeah, we basically, we have the drop down filter under the column C where you could pick if you're interested in the Washington or the Oregon, but we could easily add another row if that makes it easier.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah. And if I'm wrong, you know, it's my fault, not Ray's, because he's on vacation, so I'll be the one trying to do that.
If it's possible.
Or delegating to me. But yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Thanks.
we'll consider that. We'll attempt to do it. We won't consider it. We will attempt to implement.
Perfect. Thanks, Jake. Russ, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that the spreadsheet looks really good. My only question is, are you guys prepared to take multiple answers from multiple organizations within each population? Is that
we're hoping that the person that has the management authority and the knowledge of that population will be the one. And if we have multiple people from that management authority, they can, and hopefully they all come up the same. And if they don't come up all the same, then we'll be doing follow-up one-on-one with them. Is that what you mean?
Well, my example is the Walla Walla population, where I know ODF and WWW and CTOR all are engaged, all have data, all have different data sets. Just making sure, if you have 3 different entities submit that, then you have the ability to capture that. So,
well, they can. Yeah, they can, because that's why we're also choosing not to start providing under data availability the actual data available. So as long as we know any of them has some data, then it'll become yes, data is available. And then the other field for data source and data contact, we would be it can have multiple entities identified.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and we could add specifics to what type of data is available from that particular source of data. Is that fair to say, Nancy?
Then you're going to have to maintain that though over time, which gets complicated. Yeah.
Well, would there be, I mean, within your pick list of the data types that you guys do have with CAX, can you categorize it that, you know, what types of data, whether it's juvenile, or going back to the beginning, if it's NOSA?
You could do life stage.
Well, I'm just wondering if, again, going to the data types that you have in StreamNet and in the Coordinated Assessments Exchange, what types of data are there? And maybe that's something that can get updated and get further worked on if we can give you comments. But if it's an HCX category, NOSA, juvenile outmigrant data, is it spawner, trend data, for them to specify what kind of data specifically may be helpful.
It may be, but at the same time, that'll probably change over time. So I think I'd be open to, if the group wants to attempt to give us more detail, and then we can see how much coverage we get. But if it ends up being that only some folks are providing that level of detail, then I'll probably shy away from going to that, trying to include that in the data query, and instead have people go look elsewhere for it and find out what's available at this point in time. Mainly because these are a lot of populations. I mean, it brings into Puget Sound, it brings in, Southern Oregon. So I'm trying to keep it at a level where I want the data consumer to know that population data exists. There are data or not population scale, maybe just index level data for this population, doesn't matter what. So that at least they have a better understanding that just because they come to our site and they don't see an HLI does not mean that monitoring is not taking place. So we can see what the group provides. If we get enough coverage of content, then we can see if we can give that extra level of detail in the query. Any thoughts on that from folks in the groups? Should we attempt to come up with some sort of categorization of going, yes, there's data available and those data are adult abundance or juvenile estimates, come up with some standard category, or should we just leave it more at the, yes, there's data, go figure it out on your own? Any input on that sweet spot? Ryan?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I guess I just wanted to chime in here and kind of second what Russell's stating. I mean, I think your guys' approach is great for kind of right now, to just kind of do a fishing exercise of, who's involved, where does data exist. But I do suspect you're going to probably get back a lot of different data collectors, contributors, and people to contact for different pieces of data for each of these populations. So I guess it sounds like you guys are prepared for that, but this isn't really the time you want that information. So I guess, yeah, I just seconding that. I think Russell's correct that that's going to happen, and you're going to need a way to capture that.
So are you imagining that like Nesper's tribe would send me 3 different people to contact for three different types of data?
No, I'm just imagining that we can certainly send you, one person for all of the tribe's stuff, but I suspect what you're going to get for, these populations in different geographic areas is, it's highly collaborative with this information and who collects what, and to get to some of these high level indicators, there's 5, 6, 7 different pieces of data that's collected out there to actually gets rolled up into it. And that might be 4 or 5 different people that are collecting all of those different pieces and parts. So I think, somehow we need to actually make sure that, those people get kind of recognized for that effort and it's included. So yeah, it sounds like you guys are ready for that. I just,
Well, actually, there's one point of clarification. We're not, right now, these are for the ones that don't have HLIs. So if you
Okay.
have an HLI estimate, I'm hoping it's already in our CAPFISH HLI data system, and then you have all the metadata and all that agency contact and involved parties identified. So these would be more for the ones that we have no CAP HLIs. We probably will
Okay.
never get a CAP HLI. And one of the concerns that had been brought up in the past was, well, if I go to the CAPFISH HLI, I see, you know, data for maybe, you know, 5 populations, when I would think that there are data available for an additional 10, but I'm not getting a sense that there are any data available for those other 10. So it's more of saying it's not in the system, but don't worry about it, because those do get monitored. Data is being collected by these 3 other entities. Or yes, the data is not in the system because, well, they're extirpated. So right now there's nothing for us to monitor. So that's for like the level where we're trying to do, not necessarily the HLI
So are you,
populations.
I guess, yeah, that it could be my fault for misunderstanding this. Then I guess just for clarification for me, then are you going to be looking for, you know, any sort of information collected in these areas that are not reporting HLIs? Are we supposed to kind of state that? And what is the limit on that level of information that's being collected that you would draw the line between, you know, no information versus information?
So see if I
Does that
understand
make
this right.
sense?
I think it does. I'll just restate it and then we'll see if we're saying the same thing.
Okay.
So from what I understand, so what we're looking for now is that if there is a population, a fish population, for which we have no fish data related to any of the fish HLIs or related trends. So if you show up to the CAPFISH HLI, that population is not in our system. You can't view it. There's nothing, there's no data related to it at all. For that population, what we would be looking for is be able to populate a little pop-up that gives context that tells them, yes, there are data, there are fish-related data, not habitat data, not non-environmental data. There are fish data that could either be adult or juvenile, natural origin fish data collected for this natural population. And that's all we would be proposing to communicate at this point. But then if you guys want us to add more details, and you know, say, well, yes, this population does have data outside of the system, and there is adult data and juvenile data, and specify some broad categories, then we could look into that as well. Is that
Okay. That
Am I-
that clears it up. Thanks, Nancy. Yeah, I think I'm tracking you, so I'll just kind of, yeah, wait till the next steps, and then I think it'll become more clear. Thank you.
And when in doubt, like Laura says, dump more information at us, and then we can filter and go, okay, this is how we can manage it. Let's see,
Nadine.
we have Nadine, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, just curious, Russ had mentioned HCACs in part of his question, but then you just said natural origin. So
Mhm.
how do we treat the, you know, the HCACs as sort of an ongoing process? How do we treat that data?
Well, HCAS right now are hatchery stocks, right? So if we did our job right, there are no hatchery stocks currently in this list.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that that was the case.
Yeah, if you see one, let me know. We grabbed it by mistake. Yeah, we were trying
Right.
to just
Well,
do the.
I didn't get a
yeah.
good look at the list, so I wasn't sure if hatchery stuff was included in this or not.
Not yet, no. We'll see what we get in
All right.
terms of hatchery later once HCAC starts.
Thank you.
And Russ, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just put it back up. Just that clarification is helpful, I guess, in a good piece that right now you're just looking for the populations, and eventually my comment would be still with HCACs and others. It just seems like there will be a point that it'd be good to understand what type of data is there. You'll eventually get to that point, and for some of these populations where you have data, we know that some data is not being submitted, and that will eventually get in as well. So this effort
that's
is
a
just to
different,
get to,
yeah.
So that helps for the clarification that this is just the populations there where data is collected. And I would say that, well, you are collecting HCACs data in a population, and they do mix. So it's just my comment
the
is that
PNI.
yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but just right now we're looking for the population level.
Okay, and so that's helpful. Thanks for the clarification, and we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, and thanks for keeping asking questions, because the last thing we want to do is you guys just get the spreadsheet and go,
What did they ask us?
no idea what they're asking me to do, so I'm not going to do anything. Yeah, no, so please keep asking questions.
Yeah, thanks guys. These are great. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question.
One last question actually is with that spreadsheet with all the options, and I think you gave us some great pick list options. Are you just asking us to take this out now and fill it out, or review that? Think of like, are you missing a category, or are we doing something, or just one last quick review before you get this stuff done?
Well, it's a bit more than a quick review, because this is Ray's best guess at data availability, and then based on what he saw, we took a stab at the standardized categories that we think could apply within data availability, data source, data contact, and we were, with Lara and Ray and I, we were trying to go, well, okay, this can't be something that's high maintenance. So for the data contact person, maybe we just point to, hey, we know this population falls under the StreamNet data steward agency, so we'll just redirect you to that point of contact, so we're not constantly updating the name. Or we know, hey, we know this belongs to a cryptic member tribe, so maybe we send them all to Sharon, and Sharon figures out who to pass it on to. And then there's some other populations like the Shoban and Colville tribes and Fish Passage Center that need some more, we don't have an easy point to, so we might need more content. But that was our attempt of trying to figure out, like, how can we roll up the content in a manner that we're not constantly having to update because someone retires or changes jobs. So that's why we thought, well, maybe we just, for data stores, we say the agency or the tribe or the organization, instead of trying to really go, really down to who it is, because they might change jobs in a year, 6 months. But that was our first attempt. So as you're looking at the population, if you go, oh, this is the thing that Ray, Nancy, and Laura invented, is trying to fit like a peg in a square hole or something. This is just not good. I need another one, or I need another variation. Then that's fair game. This is completely draft. So if there's something that we're proposing that really doesn't fit, this is the time to tell us and offer something different. And then depending on how much variety we get back, we may need to schedule another meeting, not to dissuade you from providing your input, but we'll see. That
And
answer
I would.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to add that, keeping in mind, this is, the intent is to serve as essentially a portal or a conduit for the user to then go have more access to go directly to who would be able to provide those data to them.
All right. I'm not seeing hands and I'm not seeing chat. Are you ladies ready to move on? And obviously, if you guys think of something, as we kind of work through this and want to circle back, just let us know or type it in the chat and we'll just kind of remember it was earlier in the conversation and kind of circle back to you.
And I'm working on Jake's regions as we speak. So
thank you, Lara. I like multitasking. Yeah.
All right. So Nancy, this is back to you.
Yeah. So the next one we split out into two. And fingers crossed that I'm not jinxing ourselves, but we think the first one is just confirmation of what we heard from the last fish monitoring task group meeting on this topic. So as I mentioned, we have currently in our system two types of groupings. We have superpopulation groupings, which are basically the groups of fish that are monitored at that grouping level, and we receive high-level indicator estimates for that grouping as a whole. And then we have the MAFAC stocks that are, like I said, a different animal. So to focus first on the superpopulation groupings, what we believe we heard and understood from the 2021 task group recommendation is that we would, pull out the high-level indicator estimates for these known superpopulation groupings that are monitored at that scale. and we would allow the user to now be able to visualize on the map the polygon that encompasses the individual populations that make up the superpopulation grouping, whether or not, you know, well, we won't go into that, but we, I don't want to open that one up. So, you know, we basically just show this superpopulation grouping. The HLI is meant to represent these 5 or 10 populations, and we would display them on the map. Van's team would, you know, create a polygon that encompasses the existing individual population polygons we have. Next slide, I believe, after that. Meg? And what we understood that was being proposed for these existing superpopulation HLIs was that we would mirror the way the information is currently displayed for population estimates. So you would basically pick the superpopulation. You would see whether that superpopulation has a high level estimate for NOSA or Cooper spawner or SARS, whatnot, the ones that you see on the lower left. And then you would see within the tabular side who provided those data, what data sets are available. You would click on that, and then you would see the usual pop-up of the chart that shows the data for that HLI, and then there'd be also the tab that we have for the actual data that would also show you the tabular version of those data. So basically, it'd be exactly how we're displaying population level, high level estimates, and we would just apply that approach for the superpopulation high level estimates that we have in our systems. Does that sound still like the valid path forward for this grouping? Or does anyone have concern with what was proposed last year? Jake?
I don't have any concerns, just a clarification on, it appears on the bottom left there, that these superpopulations are now also going to be removed from the population display, individual population displays as well, correct? So on the map, you're going to see the superpopulation with all the populations that are within that superpopulation. Previously, when you clicked on the tab to view list of the indicators, the superpopulations were mixed with every single population. Has that been resolved to not do that anymore?
Yeah. So that was the understanding we had. So the tabular query currently keeps them separate. For the map version, that's the experience. Yeah, you would either click to see the population content for only population level estimates, whether it's partial or whole estimates, or you would click to display a superpopulation. One idea that was brought up last year, and Greg would have to remind me if we figure out how to do this or not, was, and it pops up in a question later on too, is do we, however, include in the population and superpopulation view by option an indication that, hey, this population also has a superpopulation, so you might want to go check it out. Or, hey, this, by the way, the population that make up this superpopulation are these 3. So, you know, you might want to go check out the other viewer too. Like if there's a way to connect the user so that they know, oh, the superpopulation estimate is based off of these 5, but you know, and these are the 5 populations, so you might want to go take a look at the population viewer. Like that was an idea that was brought up last year, but I'm not sure we figured out yet the implementation, but Greg can remind me if I'm remembering incorrectly.
Thanks.
I don't know if Greg wants to chime in real quick.
Yes.
Okay. That Greg?
Yes, I believe that is correct.
So are we going to attempt to do that?
I think, however we decide we want the visualization to work, there can be a bridge between the 2 in both, you know, in either direction.
Thanks. All right. Evan, Meg?
Yeah, Evan Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, I would hope that we would have some way to display the super pops that combine a number of populations and the populations together. That way we can see the continuum of the data, whether it's at the super pop level or the pop level. That way people, do know that there is data for the first 10 years for population A and B and O. Then we have more precision in the more current 10 years for these populations. And so I guess I would default to being able to show them together. And then if people do not want to see the super pops with the pops, let them make that choice. I think, yeah, so I agree that we should be planning on being able to show them together.
So have that bridge. Maybe we're probably not gonna be able to show them perfectly together because of the mapping polygon issue. But we'll have that bridger so that you're aware to go look over there, right? If I'm, did I misinterpret that?
So this is Greg. What Evan just described is what we do now. We show both we show populations and superpopulations together so that if you pick a population name, here's the world of that population. Individual, higher precision, along with lower precision superpopulation groupings for that population. That was the thought between the current display. With the new concept, we need to probably have some options that, either include or exclude associated populations when you're looking at a superpopulation, or associated superpopulations when you're looking at higher precision single population. To say, I want to see associated superpopulation with this population, or I don't. And the visual, the map, we're just going to probably have to try some things to see what looks okay. But
well, yeah, you could probably pull that off and not mess with the map, right? So if they do the view by superpopulation, they have the outline shown there, and then you just reserve that on/off button for the tabular portion.
For the tabular, right? For the tabular part of it would be easier. Yeah, the visualization of superpopulations and individual populations on the map together is just, you can do it, but it gets a little
wonky.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we can do that. We've allowed people to view the polygon that matches the view by option they pick, whether they're coming at from population or superpopulation. And then in the tabular version, we can look into adding that functionality of also display related population or super pops.
Right. You keep the map would stay static with the direction you entered through superpopulations or through populations.
Yeah, you're game for it. I'm willing to let you explore how we can pull that off. Yeah.
This is Mike. There's one more wrinkle. A single population is often part of more than one superpopulation, and so it's not like, oh, this is part of this one thing over here. That's not the case. So they vary in size and they overlap.
All right. We'll see how often that happens.
Yep. Nothing in the chat. No hands raised, Nancy.
Okay. Okay. All right. Now for the harder one. Hopefully you still have energy. We're 55 minutes into this. So the next one is the, oh wait, okay. Well, that's the conversation we just had. So you can keep on going. Whoop, next one. Okay, so the next one is the one that's a bit more of a challenge for us, the MAFAC docs. So in our discussion last year and approved by the executive committee, there was support for us to also provide a view by option to display the populations that are part of a MAFAC doc. So we, for the map, we figured we'd do same approach as we are doing with superpopulation, basically outline a polygon of the populations that make up this MAFAC stock. So I don't think we're going to have any issues with that one, since that's just the visual part. So now the difficult part, next slide, is we've been trying to explore, well, okay, so how do we show content for that MAFAC stock? We have individual population or variation of that theme, high-level indicator estimates in our system. And we also have a lot of information from the MAFAC Phase 2 report that could, we could pick and choose and see what we could do to tell the story of these MAFAC stocks so people have a good understanding of what we have in the system and what's represented by our system and what is not in our system. So with Ray and Laura and I, we took a look at what the options were in terms of content, and we came up with the universe of things that might work is shown in this summary table. And then what we did is we came up with two potential options of what we could consider displaying when someone clicks on a MAFAC stock in our system, when they go onto that view by option. So we're going to show you both options, and by no means does that mean that you can't come up with a third option, which just is a starting point, and we'll see how that goes. All right, next slide. Oh, and actually, first thing, does anyone know what I mean by MAFAC stocks? Do I need to define that? Okay, I'll assume you've all been involved in that process one way or another. So the first thing we thought of is, well, perhaps, we could do a minimum amount of content, pulling some from the Phase 2 report, content that's pretty, static. So it wouldn't really be maintaining it actively in our system. They'd just be static fields that we would populate once with Ray's help. And then we could look at the high-level indicators we have for the populations that are part of that stock, limiting ourselves to only high-level indicator estimates for natural origin abundance, spawner abundance, and escapement. I think would be fine as well for those populations. So we would only be dealing with one HLI because the MAFAC does not have goals for necessarily juveniles or SARS. And these are the ones that seem to be the most focused for other reporting needs. And basically look at the population we have and then find ways to organize those HLI estimates we have for the populations that make up a stock to bring it in alongside the static contact we would take out of the Phase 1 report. Phase 2 report, sorry. Next slide. So we thought potentially an easy way to go about this, depending on how everyone feels about this. We could, have the map, have people pick the species to run, and then select that they want to see MAFAC stocks. And then we would have the list of the MAFAC stocks, and when they would select one of the MAFAC stocks, we could have a simple table that would pop up that would let them know how many populations make up this MAFAC stock, how many of them, if this stock is consisted of, or considered as threatened or not, like what would be the ESA status associated with it, that would come out of the Phase 2 report. Out of the Phase 2 report, we could indicate the number of historical population, number of block population, number of extant population that make up the stock. We could then flag how many of the populations we have cap HLIs for in our system. So in this instance, it would be 16. We could grab out of the Phase 2 report the low, medium, high group goals associated for that MAFAC stock. We could also grab out of the Phase 2 report the 10-year geomean that was developed for the historical MAFAC stock abundance versus the recent 10-year geomean abundance that was calculated by the Klamath Basin Partnership. That back then it was a snapshot in time of 2008 to 2017. And then the more sensitive one maybe is whether or not we would attempt to create a geomean based on the available whole population NOSA abundance for the last 10 years and produce that, we would calculate in our system to display on this table. So a lot of it would be static content. And then you have the option of we could just show you that we have 16 populations with HLIs that are linked to the stock. And then we could go a step further and go, well, maybe we calculate a geomean for those 16 population to put alongside the historical one. Thoughts on option 1? Tom?
So everything in this table you're showing us is fixed except the CAP HLI's recent tenure in the bottom right. Is that correct?
And the CAP HLI number. Yeah. The count at the first row all the way to the right.
Oh, the 16.
Yeah.
So I guess my curiosity is you've got the total for 2008 to 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, is there a way to run this? What I'd want to see is the comparison of auto-generating it out of the CAX versus what we used in the Columbia Basin Partnership.
So those two on the bottom where you see Columbia Basin Partnership total, that's what was generated by the MAFAC Phase 2 report?
I understand that. Yep.
Okay, and then one on the right would be what we would propose auto generating for the whatever recent 10 years. It would be a moving
which
10
would
year.
take today, 2022, and back 10 years.
Yeah,
What
is that
I'm
what you're
saying
saying? Okay.
As a quality control, what I'd like to see is to force it to do the recent 10-year to match the 2008 to 2017, just as a quality control to see what the difference is. Because I like what you're providing here. I just want to make sure it's apples to apples.
Yeah, and actually we played with that behind the scenes, so we could easily do it visible. So we'd have the Columbia Basin total 2008 to 2017, the CAP total 2008 2017, and then the CAP recent. And from what we've noticed when we tried two extreme examples, it was maybe, there might be 1,000, a few hundred to 1,000 difference. So we could display that as a third thing so people could see it.
I'm not proposing that you display it. I'm proposing that you do that as a quality control to make sure that, because I like having that fixed number of 2008 to 2017 for MAFAC. And then if I go in here this year or in 5 years, my number compares back to that number. So I like that. I'm just curious. Quality control, if those are apples to apples.
They're close. They're close. Yeah. So they're not apples to apples. They're like a Honeycrisp apple to a Macintosh apple.
Right. Okay.
So Ray did it for two extreme, one of which we had very few CAP HLIs estimate for one stock, and one of which we had quite a few CAP HLIs covering it, and the difference wasn't that much. We only did it for two as an example, like worst case, best case scenario. So we could share that with you, those two examples, or is there something else that I'm missing that you would want us to do?
No, I just want to make sure that if I use this, I know what I'm looking at.
Yeah, so what we discovered when he was playing around with the numbers is that even when, say what the worst case scenario he looked at, I don't know if I should show this or not, but the worst case scenario that we looked at we had maybe 4 catfish HLIs in our system and we were missing 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. 14 of the populations that were part of a stock did not have catfish HLIs. And even when we went that far, that because the ones that we are monitoring, the abundance tend to be so much larger than the ones that we're not monitoring, they tended to get washed out, the ones that we were not monitoring. So a lot of the ones that we weren't monitoring, they were, for which there would have been data, the estimated abundance that the partnership came up with was something like, oh, 3 fish, 300 fish, 200 fish, 100 fish. So in comparison to the ones we are monitoring, where we're talking thousands of fish, you ended up washing out those smaller populations that are not being monitored and are not in the system. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's yeah, more like a Honeycrisp Macintosh comparison. It's not an apple and an orange. And we were trying to indicate the fact that we don't have 100% coverage of the MAFE population, including the MAFE stocks, by indicating, the number of populations in the group versus what we have in HLIs. So maybe we can make that clearer too.
Could you, what's the difference between the bottom row CBP total versus what you said we're comparing to, which I believe you said is the data we actually have? What are those two things?
The Climate Basin Partnership total, that's when they had the workshops of experts together to come up with an estimate of the abundance of those population that made up a given stock. They also access data that we don't have in our system. So they may have had like an index trend data or a best estimate from the knowledgeable biologists estimating what that population abundance may be, and that went into that time period calculated by the CBP. And
thanks,
Jake.
Nancy. I'm sorry.
Oops. Wait for Jake first. He's had his hand up first. Go ahead.
Sure. Kind of been alluding to this and comparing a Macintosh to a crisp.
Honeycrisp.
I think we're getting closer to an orange on one of them. I mean, you kind of alluded to it, where these newer years after 2017, some populations might have a null value for a particular year, even not necessarily that, just for various reasons, budget, things like that. And I think of the Sandy too. I'd need to know what stocks, to be more specific, were in this example of fall Chinook. But some of our estimates, we have a known very small proportion that are early run and late run. And it's still very difficult to parse it out. The biologists know this. And so it's our best estimate of potentially having some early stock mixed in with these fall Chinook on the Sandy. And the other thought that came to mind is, I'm not sure that I can make a decision on yes or no on this. It's kind of leading to me more, at least a steering committee level question. Maybe not the executive committee, but at least steering committee, to maybe first kind of get their thoughts on this, because there's a lot of complications, I think, just besides this example here, and trying to compare what they did 5 years ago. So that's my 2 cents.
And anything that goes through here will go through the steering committee, the executive committee, before it gets implemented.
I was meaning that you might have to wait till September for even an answer on this.
Well, I'm trying to get them optioned, so we have option 1, option 2, and then or a third one, so that we can at least give them something to react to.
Okay.
Let's see who's next.
Either Russell or Tom.
Russell was first.
Okay.
Russ,
You're muted, Russell.
Thanks. I think Tom's comment about the QAQC is a good one, just to make sure you're comparing stuff. And I think it's good to know what the CPV total was if you're taking data and having the ability to compare it to the CAP-I HLI. Doing a comparative number would be good. I had several conversations, whether you're looking at a 10-year mean, a 5-year mean, just having the flexibility for people to turn on some different things is important. I think there were some questions recently by people, why are we really using a geomean in general versus a mean? I know TRT and everybody assigned using a geometric mean. And I think there were questions that other people brought up with, 0 years and how it's calculated. I think it's good on the cap HLIs on the recent 10 years, just to note what year it's based on. So, if you have recent 10 years, just state which year it's based on, because sometimes there may be a delay in different people submitting their indicators. And, do you wait until they're all equal or not? So just trying to give some options and flexibility and thoughts on what you're looking at for when you display the totals. And when you get it, based on, again, the conversation, you have a way to calculate that. For doing a geomean, NOAA did a presentation in an app and a tool and talked about how they accounted for their 0 and null years, imputing values or doing something else. So I think it's just important if you are doing a geometric mean in a value and doing comparisons, it would be good to get a geometric mean value that's method and approach that's kind of standardized and agreed to by people. So that's just a higher level piece. I do have one comment going back to when you went onto this super pops, but I'll follow that later with a follow-up later. I don't have chat functionality, so I couldn't type it in, but I'll follow up later on that.
Yeah, the reason we went with geomean is just because that's what they did, and we're trying to not go too far with that. And yeah, and the 10-year geomean, we're bringing it up for discussion because someone had brought it up a while back, but we don't have to display the 10-year geomean. There's another option we can do, an option 2 as well. That we'll show you.
Well, just the clarification on is just noting what year it is, because the time that information comes in when you update it, half of the populations, depending on the sponsor, may be updated, and you may be comparing a geometric mean that's 2008 through 2017. As 2019 data versus 2020 versus 2022. So being able to say which year range that's actually through.
Yeah, that's definitely important.
It's going to be a complication.
Yeah, definitely.
It looks good overall. That's the positive.
Thanks,
we'll just
Russ.
see about the 10-year geomean, because even that makes me skittish. But anyway, all right, Tom.
Yeah, so I think I do have a recommendation here. I agree with Russell that the recent 10-year should include the date range that 10-year encompasses. And then I think that I changed my mind a little bit. I think you should add another number here that is CAP HLI baseline 2008 to 2017. So that the CBP total, then you would know that the CAP HLI baseline is what represents that CBP total, but what the CAP is generating versus what was generated in MAFAC. So I would add
call
that.
it baseline, but at least it'd be starting point or comparative.
Well,
yeah,
well,
I get
the
what you're saying.
MAFAC is for a very specific purpose, right? For the Columbia Basin Partnership. And I would say that is the baseline that we'll compare back to in the future. And we can pass this by the steering committee, but I would propose, just because that helps basically show, that's what we're comparing against as we move into the future 5 years from now and 50 years from now, hopefully. We look back and we say, well, this is was the start of the partnership. So anyways, that'd be my proposal.
Well, I like the idea of, if we do go down this route, definitely to show that same time period for CAP HLIs.
Yeah,
so we'll include that as an idea if that goes forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are you still hands up, Russell, or you haven't brought it back down?
No, it just brought it back because what Tom said, and I just realized on my other comment. My only other question is, choosing the MAFAC value versus CAP HLI versus also, and it's just a question of sharing coordinated assessments information. I asked this about a topic of sharing geometric means. An alternative is comparing it to what NOAA is producing in their 5-year status assessment. But again, that may not be consistent with a MAFAC stock. That may be just specific to a population. So just however that is calculated. So just one other idea of different sources or information that you may want to consider.
Another way of doing QA/QC for all of these numbers in a way.
Yeah. Lowering hand, sorry.
All right. Anything else on this potential one before we move to the other one that will give hopefully even more ideas of what we could or could not include?
Yeah, nothing in comments. Nancy.
All right, let's go to the second one. So the second one is looking at other things we could bring in, again, static content. There's a comment there, but I can't read the whole thing. Can you read it all, Meg?
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, totally. This one's from Nadine Craft. One additional thing that you may have already accounted for, have a pop-up or some way to explain some of the less common acronyms like CBTFP and somewhere to explain what a 10-year geomean E, etc. is for less expert users.
Always a great reminder for people that are not living our jargon. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, great
Good
suggestion.
All right, so, okay, so this one, the next one we're about to show you has a lot more content that we pull out. And we played around also with the idea of like, well, if we don't do a geomean, maybe we just show you, we just plot what we have so that we can get away from, you know, trying to figure out how do we do the correct geomean, like Russell pointed out with the NOAA tool. So next slide. And again, okay, so this one starts off again with same thing. You get the map, shows the polygons of the population that make up the stock, the MAFAC stock that was selected. Then we thought, well, okay, you could again bring in the geomean or only bring the content from the CAP. Sorry, not the CAP, from the Columbia Basin Partnership, like only show, okay, the Columbia Basin Partnership has this as a 10-year geomean from this time frame, and these were the low, medium, high goals that were discussed at that time period. You could try and do the CAP HLI geomean with the variations we just discussed for the previous option, or we could just delete that, and then just that lower side of with the bar graph would just show stuff from the MAFAC group, their Columbia Basin Partnership 10-year recent geomean for their 10-year time period, and identifying those years, plus their low, medium goal, kind of showing that, you know, where we were at that time period in terms of abundance versus the goals we were trying to that were defined during that process. We could again bring up at the upper left side, you know, the number of populations included the stocks, and the more I look at this, the more we need to find a more visible way of conveying of all these 21 stocks. You know, we only have CAP HLIs for 16 of the populations in that stock. Of those 21 populations included in the stock, there's only 16 for which we have CAP HLIs. We could bring in other content from the report. Again, static content would not be updated unless the MAFAC, or I guess they're not called MAFAC anymore, whatever the follow-on process, if they ever generate updated content related to that phase 2 report, you know, then at that point in time, we could bring it in, but staying with the MAFAC stock grouping, not straying too far abroad. So we try and at least stay with a bushel of apples and not branch out too much. And the alternative to doing the geomean is, well, maybe we just come up with a way to display, you know, the estimate we have. It could get really messy depending on how many stocks we have. We might try to just do a blanket sum of the HLIs we have for the given populations for a stock, or somehow we just, you know, just plot it out. Does this inspire any other options or any reaction to go, heck, no way, don't try and bring that in, or bring something else in that's related to these MAFAC groupings?
And
Russell?
Russ, before you go ahead, Jake had just agreed with Nadine's point that it would probably also be good to describe what a superpopulation is for the users.
Oh yes, definitely. Yep.
All right, go ahead, Russ.
My quick comment is just in my experience of being able to roll up across multiple populations, MPGs and everything, and looking at the summaries, I know there's lots of times where populations are excluded and there's no data. in graphs and things that we were using, we weren't using line graphs, we were using bar graphs to do cumulative, where you would show a different color for each population with kind of a chart that would show it, and you would highlight
that's a nice way.
highlight that, you know, some populations did not have data for a given year or multiple years. So you can say no data, a little box with these populations at the top that would say no data, and leave something that would kind of highlight that. So
that's a nice way of doing it. Yeah, that's actually a nice way of doing that. And that would get over you wouldn't even have to, then the people could see which population is missing in any given year. And since we're just displaying what we have, there would be no geomean involved, right? Any thoughts on what we could, again, like, I guess we hadn't clarified that, but whatever we display here, whatever we choose moving forward, we'll bring that back to the steering committee and the executive committee. And the reason I'm trying to contain you to what we have in the system and not bring in additional data to be added is because that conversation of more complicated, you know, calculations and how to bring data outside of our system, that's happening, hopefully, through the Cleveland Basin Collaborative and MPCC process. Jake?
Kind of on the lines of Nadine's comment and about definitions and whatnot. Either one of these options, I think it'd be really good to have the URL linked to the reference for this for the user. Because when I see this, I don't want people to get confused about the state of Oregon's own recovery plans and, you know, abundance goals and different things that, you know, that are approved by the commission. And just my opinion, this is interesting. It might be the second option might be a little too busy to have on to display on the website like this. If this option gets chosen, it might be better to have it set up similarly to the way the current CAP highlights are, to where you kind of go to a different little section of the query page and choose which stock you want and that kind of thing. After you've done it on the map.
Yeah, definitely split it up a little bit, like have tabs or something.
Because the way it's set up, it just appears like it's going to be hovering over the map, like you choose this. So I pictured this pop-up being kind of like over on the map. Maybe like that's not the intent, but
I think that's what it would be, because that's the only way it would fit. Yeah, it wouldn't fit on the side thing. It would be a pop-up. That's how I was envisioning it too. And then you could have tabs though, like we have on the current pop-ups.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
Russell?
Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, just the other thing, just to save space when looking at this, the way, you know, I've been summarizing it, rather than having the recent 10-year mean on the left, or whether it's geomean or 10-year mean, putting that on the graph because it is variable for every year, so you can see what that, you know, variable mean is for each of those years. You know, you could plot that over there with a bar for that low starting point at the baseline, as Tom was saying, would be another option to think about. That way you can free up some of the real estate that you have, because there's a lot on the low goal, medium goal, and high goal. And sometimes when you're looking at the charts, I know based on space in the data, sometimes the numbers are going to be so low that you're not even going to see, you know, those low goals or the medium goals and the high goals. So it's good to have it on the side for context. But just sometimes when you display those goals, having some scroll bar or something that allows you to scroll up or see something on the graph can get better context. But if you can't see your data and can't see the variability and your numbers are really low, that's a hard part. So that was my only comment, was a different way to look at the geomeans and having those on the graph for it to be able to turn them on or off. So we have a function that you could click on a button to turn on a a goal that you wanted to see, and the graph would be dynamic relative to that. But set a default to show us a subset of goals as a minimum. So that's the last comment.
Anything else before I throw something completely different at you that just came to my mind as I'm listening to all of you?
Mike has his hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, the one lower left, when I first glanced at this before looking at the before the discussion, I thought there were 5 columns of data, and those 3 on the right kind of took me a bit to realize that those were actually just goals and they were not numbers of actual fish.
So it'd be
So
best to do kind of like that line instead.
Kind of like the concept on the right better, showing the goal in some other way.
So it stands out there, their goals, not count, not calculation. Anything else on this before I try and make you visualize something? Different colors for the goals, yeah, or at least a different pattern so that people pick up on it. Okay, that one was short enough I could read it in the pop-up box, Sharon.
Perfect.
All right.
All right, let's visualize.
Yeah, let's visualize. So if no one's giving me a third option, I have go back up to the previous one. I'm gonna actually make you go back up twice. Okay. And to option 1. Okay, I guess another one. I lied. Okay, there, that one. That one's perfect. So let's try something different. So based on what I've been hearing from all of you, the other option that we could potentially do is we could have a pop-up box. So like we've been describing, you know, that you pick your species, you want to see the MAFEX stock, you see on the map, you know, the red polygon encompassing the smaller populations that are part of that stock. And then what you would end up doing is, like we saw in previous versions where we have on the left side of our query, a tabular summary of the data sets available for the different HLIs. You could click NOSA tab and then see what NOSA content we have. What I'm thinking maybe we could do is when you would pick a MAFEX stock X, on the left side, which is more of a tabular summary of content, we could show you each population that make up that stock for which there are data, and show you, the possibility to view those data. And we can also include the population that don't have data and just say that doesn't have data. So on the side, you kind of have a list of all the population, and if you click it, you would be able to view the data. Probably make a mess for Greg, but we could play along that theme. And then the pop-up box that we would have associated with the MAFEX stock level would just have the MAFEX content, not try and intermix any of the Coordinate Assessment Partnership fish HLI content. So it'd be like a static content of whatever content we want from that phase 2 report. If we want to bring in just the historical block extent, population count, the Columbia Basin Partnership MAFEX goals, low, medium, high, the Columbia Basin 10-year geomean that they estimate for historical abundance versus for that snapshot in time 2008, 2017. We could have that as a thing in a pop-up box for the stock level. But then if you wanted to view what data we have for the population level, then it would be something you pick from the left side to view data for that population, and it would give you the same experience you're having now for if you come to the CAP HLI mapper and click on the population to view those data. But all we would do is we'd give you the option to view the data for the population for which we have fish HLIs, but we would not attempt to create a 10-year geomean or try and map those data in a catfish HLI. We would just allow you to explore them like we would normally when you pick a population view by option. We would just group them as part of that stock and only provide stock level information based on what's currently in the phase 2 report. Does that make sense? Can anyone visualize what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Does anyone not understand what I just tried to describe? And I can try and have Laura mop it up. No, I could send it out later for another option to explore. If anyone does not understand what I'm trying to say, just like, I don't know, pick a reaction if you're allowed to pick one, or raise your hands real quick, and then we'll go and ask, check in with Russell for his question. Neither way, I'll try and mock that up before we post these slides. Always skittish when it's really silent like this. Okay. Russell, go ahead. Maybe they'll give him time to.
Yeah,
think
I'm not allowed to do, as I said, for some reason, when I lost Microsoft Teams when I'm on the web, I don't have a reaction thing for thumbs up or anything. And I only have my hand, no chat. My quick comment on that is I think, the idea is good. I think the concern or a comment that I have is if we want to try to do something and be proactive to make sure that the MAFAC group is producing information and using the information and being consistent, I think the best thing that we can do is show for the Coordinated Assessments Partnership and the agreement to get the data in there, do what we can to provide summaries and provide an information so it's not an independent assessment, independent updates. So I think it's valuable to show where the data is today relative to what was started in having that information. So just my comment is just showing independent what the MAFAC information is on its own. Is okay, but I think if you have the opportunity to provide a service and provide them the estimates and provide the information based on what we're getting, or force entities to provide their data here so that it can help produce that, I think becomes a better service to the continuation of that process. So that'd just be my 2 cents.
So keep the option of trying to produce a geomean as comparison, like in option 1. I'm not too sure about option 2, but as an option 1, and see if we can get the executive committee and steering committee comfortable with the idea of us doing that.
Well, I think option 2 is still beneficial, and yes, I think get the steering committee, ask if they want to do it. But I think it's beneficial to produce. That way, other people aren't independently doing it. It just is a task and something that is produced, and it provides the value for coordinated assessments to show and share that information. That's just my 2 cents.
All right. Any other thoughts or ideas we could explore? And then just to give a hint, my thoughts right now is I would remock up the options, circulate it back out, and try and get some more of our folks that we know participated in MAFAC that had to drop off or couldn't join today to get their input as well before we figure out which way we want to go for the executive committee and steering committee. Is there anything anyone wants to say, like, don't do that, or yes, we really like this aspect of it, or what was proposed verbally, or what was shown, one of the other things?
Yeah, nothing in comments, Nancy.
And
no hand.
No hands. Let's see. Evan?
Sorry, Nancy. Yeah, I was just sort of working on the visualization and thinking about it and assimilating what you're throwing out there. And I think I'm tentatively, I can sort of visualize what you're saying, but really, until I, get in there and start working through some queries and physically doing it, then it'll really generate, similar to the initial feedback that we gave on the other updates to the website. So, yeah, I just wanted to give you some feedback. I think that's probably where a lot of people are. We're just like taking it all in, and it takes me a while to visualize it. So, a tentative yes.
Okay. And I appreciate you verbalizing that instead of my trying to guess.
Yeah, silence sort of sucks sometimes during presentations.
Especially when you can't see anyone reacting, like, hello. Yeah, okay. Okay, go on to the next slide for now. or go back to where we were, sorry. At the discussion, I think it was.
This one, yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna do a little bit modification of this. I think everyone can do a hand up, right? Or at least that should be the minimum ability. Okay, so I'm gonna go through these questions and I'm gonna modify maybe the last two a little bit. But what I'd like to get an indication is how many people are okay to what I'm proposing so I can have an idea of what to mock up as version 2. So for the MAFAC groupings and the superpopulation groupings, the first question is, does it make sense for us to just create a bigger polygon that encompasses whatever polygons, population level polygons that make up that superpopulation or that MAFAC stock? So basically one big red polygon, if you can see that color red, with the little polygons of the individual population inside it being shown so that people can see that lots of little population are making up this bigger polygon. Is everyone okay with that idea as a display on the map? And all you have to do is raise your map. Oh, someone got a bit fancier thing. It's also in my checking that you guys are still listening.
Yeah. Sneaky Nancy, sneaky.
Yay! Okay, there's still at least 6 people are listening. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Don't lower
Jake
your
gave
hand
us
yet.
yeah, Jake gave us an applause, so I'm counting him too. So he's in.
Okay, so the pops are good. So that polygon idea is solid for the mockup. And the other idea that popped up a little bit that Greg is going to explore is, are we all supportive of the idea that regardless of whether you are viewing a superpopulation or viewing a MAFAC stock or viewing an individual population, that we will add a way for you to bridge as a user to be aware that if you're viewing population A through the view by population, that, hey, by the way, you know, there are MAFAC stock group. This population does belong to a MAFAC stock, or this population does belong to a super pop. Kind of flag it. Of how far this flagging can be, we'll see the magic that Greg can do, but at a minimum, have a bridger that indicates it's there. And then same way as you go through a superpopulation view by option, you would be flagged to get, hey, the superpopulation contains these 5 population, or hey, the superpopulation contains population that are also part of the MAFAC group, or something like that. We have flag to let you know. And then same time with the MAFAC stock groupings, we would flag, hey, this MAFAC stock contains populations. So be aware, these are the population. We have bridging. So does everyone have like the idea of that bridging concept so that people are aware that there's other data that could be found? Hands up.
Lots of thumbs up. Yeah.
Okay.
And while you guys are doing that, Mike Bannock had left a comment just saying yes to pops showing within super pops and MAFAC groups, but use dash lines between populations.
Okay. So that they visually can see the difference. That's a good point. And someone had an expression of surprise. That must be Greg going, oh, no. Not sure. All right. Now, thank you. Now for the last one, the difficult one, the MAFAC stock. What would you think about if we'll update the options? So we have maybe a total of 4 options that will show like the minimalistic approach that I tried to visualize with words, which is never that great. The intermediate approach that includes the input from Tom and Russell and the other folks that provide input on variations of option 1 and option 2, and potentially a 4th approach that will be a different combination of what we heard. And I would basically end up having those 4 approach being mocked up. And we would, I think let's try using MS Forms. If we maybe try and use MS Forms to sort of get a vote on them, of seeing level of comfort with it. It might have to be an MS form that companies that is linked to a document, because I don't think we can bring in too many images into MS form, and send that out to the group so that you guys can provide feedback and look at these visuals, take a bit more time and complete the MS forms and go yes, no, run away, and maybe provide like other input going, this one I could live with, but you need to change these things. Or if you really end up going with this one, I'm really concerned about this. So kind of give you a bit more time to provide input in a semi-structured way using MS forms on the 4 new versions of the mockup. And the intent of that would be we would get enough input from you. And if we see that we're solidifying around 2, then those are the 2 would move over to the executive committee and steering committee for discussion later this year in September. If it looks like we're really still all over the place, then I would ask Meg to schedule another meeting for us to dive
We could
into
actually do it all. We could do it all in MS forms. We can do an image for each question and then have input. So yeah, that would work well.
Okay. So the last question is, are you guys game to participate in a semi-structured survey using MS form to give us feedback on 4 new options for the MAFAX doc that will show that we will share with you via email, so that we don't have to convene a meeting for these 4 options to get quick feedback on level of comfort or other ideas. And Meg would be the one saying that. So are we supportive of receiving from Meg an MS form to ask your input on 4 new options, and then decide after that if we need to have a meeting to solidify options that we would move forward to the steering committee? All right, looks like everyone likes the idea of MS form. Good.
Efficiency. Well done.
Especially
Plus,
with the
everybody
summer.
just loves getting mail from me. They love it.
It brightens up their week. Yes. Yes. Okay, so that'll be the path forward for that one. To see if we can get, something more solid developed for the steering committee. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up related to the superpopulation or the MAFAX docs now?
Yeah, Casey and Angie, do you guys have your hands up, or is that just from the last question? Okay.
It's from the last question. I can't seem to click it to get it to go back down.
Yeah, I can lower hand for you, Casey.
You can help that.
Thank you.
Russ, go ahead.
It was just a comment that I didn't make earlier because I can't find the chat on superpopulations, and it went back to a survey that we did in the fish monitoring work group. I think it's helpful, and there's just a better process. There is, just as a step for this, under the coordinated assessments, there is a superpopulation appendix of defining the populations. And I think just going through that process to make sure that how you define the superpopulation ID, name, and selecting the related population IDs that are attributed to that is important. So I think that's just one thing that needs to happen in the functionality, that when you create those, there can be some different superpopulation combinations that maybe, just as an example, maybe somebody has a superpopulation group of Lolo Creek and South Fork Clearwater versus a superpopulation of the Selway and Locksaw. But sometimes somebody could have a superpopulation that will combine that whole MPG. So I just wanted to say that just a recommendation, if you can, take a look at the DES and make sure that it is updated and there's a clear way to define those populations that are associated, population names or population IDs that are associated with the superpops. And then you can easily then generate the population polygons for those. But I think there's a lot of different things or ways that people are defining that, and just making it the DES as clear as possible to define that population or superpopulation needs to be just updated a little bit. There were some inconsistencies I saw in the DES between population names and superpopulation names in the last coordinated assessments DES version that was shared. So just a note.
Okay, so that'll be something the CAP core team can look at when they start looking at tightening up the DES. A sticky note for Mike. Yep. All right. And that's it for me, Meg.
Okay.
Somehow I always end up
Alright.
giving myself homework. I don't know how I do that. Okay.
So maybe to soften up the ending, it kind of comes back around to the second task on the one I touched on. So this is again in the instructions. So it's again, please review the tab. Oh, it summarizes all of the instructions actually. Could you go to the next one, please, Meg? So again, this is on the standard field content tab, and just it's looking at providing alternatives in the associated comment column to the proposed standard comment that would appear on StreamNet. So next slide, please. And then this is really small, but it's yeah, it's on the spreadsheet that we'll send you. So just reviewing the proposed standard content that we have there regarding data availability status. So we have a couple of options and just comments on that or alternatives, as well as data source, how we may display that, and the various options for that, and then data contact. So just indicating how we would standardize indicating the contact for the various data. And again, you can add comments or additional.
Think we kind of already covered this basically. Just so you guys know, we're gonna have you submit the corrected version of the draft data availability Excel file to me. We're kind of thinking June 23rd, unless anybody has some heartburn over that and needs more time. I know a lot of people are starting field season and summer vacation, etc. So if you guys have issues, I suppose just let us know. Like when we send it out, just say, you know, I'm gonna do this, but I need a little bit of extra time. And I guess we'll kind of play it by ear on the whether or not we should meet again to review the updated data display visuals. That'll just kind of depend on how things play out. But otherwise, I will wrap this up. Here, and as you can see under the line there, here's the task lead contact information again. The meeting summary and recording will be available next week. There's a link to the April fish monitoring work group event, and it has a link to Eli Holmes of NOAA. She did a tech talk on common metric methods and ESU DPS trends and status and other analysis involved in writing NOAA's 2022 biological viability assessment. So if you guys want to check that out, it was a really good talk. To close out for today, I would like to give a big thank you to our fish monitoring work group task leads, Nancy Leonard and Lara Erickson. And thanks to you guys, the task team, for joining us and participating. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules, especially on a Friday, to help us coordinate these activities and develop products to help the managers and the biologists throughout the region. So thanks a lot, guys, and have a great Friday and have a great weekend.